Wow, is there a lot to talk about today? I don't even know where to begin. We've got the Supreme Court potentially cutting away a bit at Roe v. Wade, although we won't know that until next year in the spring, I think, is when Supreme Court decisions come out. And I guess, even though I don't want to make that today's topic, I will just say I'll throw my prediction in now. I highly doubt they will completely cut it. But it seems like if Roberts was asking questions that seem somewhat anti-Roe, then there's probably a good chance that they're going to scale it back a bit, because the Roe decision was anything but middle of the road, and I think somebody like Roberts would not want to give the pro-life crowd a win. It would not, or I should say, they don't want them to be in control, because you have to think about the mind of somebody like Roberts. He's 100% optics driven. He doesn't care about the Constitution. He doesn't care about human life. He cares about optics. And to him, I think he doesn't like the optics of the court essentially intervening and on behalf of the pro-abortion crowd and giving them carte blanche in all 50 states. So I could see Roberts getting on board with some of the more pro-life justices in order to level the playing field a bit. So, with the Roe v. Wade discussion out of the way, there's a lot of insanity going on. We have bipolar markets right now. They don't really know how to react to the whole, to Powell's whole transitory is dead. Or is transitory dead? Powell seemed to try and breathe some life back into Team Transitory today. At least that's what I'm hearing. I can't find anything about this, but I'm seeing people talk about, Powell's rolling things back, which wouldn't surprise me. It's typical of the Fed. Actually, it reminds me of when I met a voting member of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. I won't say who, quite a few years ago, and I had a chance to talk to them candidly about the process. This was back when this was after the end of the taper, and it was when they were talking about starting to raise rates. It was right at the beginning of the last rate hike cycle, which of course ended with the Christmas Eve massacre of 2018. And I asked this Fed official, hey, aren't you guys worried about popping the asset bubble with when you raise rates? Don't you think that perhaps assets have become a certain factor going into the value of assets in the market today? Assets, whether they be bonds, stocks, real estate, whatever. A certain factor that has been the 0% Fed funds rate. And if that's the case, when you start raising the Fed funds rate, you're going to start deflating asset prices. Does that concern you? And I was sort of taking for granted that the Fed wants asset prices to always go up. And he said, well, you know what? We're only changing things at 25 basis points every time. And if things start to go in the wrong direction, we can just reverse and go back the other direction. And so the Fed really, the way they look at it, they're living on a day-by-day basis. And so Powell's behavior this week would seem to signal that. Yesterday he's saying, when somebody asked him about it directly, hey, when is inflation not transitory anymore? Pat Toomey was gave him a good bit of pressure about, hey, this transitory stuff, this talk, it's ridiculous. And so when, given a little pushback, Powell said, well, maybe we shouldn't use the term transitory anymore. And then today, the Powell comes out and he says something to the effect of, well, we're not going to give an inflation forecast. Oh my gosh, no, we can't. Who knows what inflation is going to be? I mean, there could be no inflation. We could have deflation in consumer prices over the next 6 months. I have no idea what's going on. And that's just a classic Fed move. Powell, say what you will about him. He's an animal of the Fed. People, it was kind of funny when Trump appointed him. A lot of people said, wow, he's like the first Fed chairman who was not an economist. He's an attorney. What an outsider, a lawyer. Well, guess what? Powell's no outsider. He's firmly rooted in Fed groupthink, and he's just as reactionary as that Fed official that I met all those years ago. Now, if it wasn't, if you weren't already convinced that the stock market lives and dies by the word of Powell, I think that the start of this week is a good example of that. If you want to look at the way in which Powell's been speaking, his attitude, his candor, or his canter, I think is the right word, and you look at sort of the minute-by-minute chart of the major stock indices, you'll see there's a pretty strong correlation there. Powell's been very wishy-washy the last couple of days. He's going, well, maybe inflation's a problem. Maybe it's not a problem. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. And the stock market, if you look at the price, the last 2 days, intraday, they don't seem to know what's going on. You got prices through the floor, then you got it to the moon, then you got it back through the floor. And so, in my opinion, Wall Street is hanging on Fed's every word, or Powell's every word. They're looking for hopium. They want to be told that everything's going to be okay. They want to be told that stocks only go up, that everything's fine. And the minute that Powell deviates from the sunshine and rainbows narrative, everything falls apart. And that would be fine. Frankly, I think that should happen. I think that stock market valuations are ridiculous when you compare them to GDP. I am a fan of the Buffett indicator. I mean, I don't have to be a fanboy of Warren Buffett to acknowledge that I agree with him that market cap to GDP is an important indicator because, the stock market should be somewhat related to the underlying economy. There should be some connection there. And in America, that connection is gone. Our economy's been flat for a very long time. We have very little economic growth. Yet we have massive astronomical growth in the stock market. Is it just that all these companies that are traded on the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ, is it just that all the growth in the country is concentrated in those companies, and so the reason why the economy overall is not growing very much is because all of the non-publicly traded companies aren't growing? No, these companies that are publicly traded aren't necessarily growing either. It's just that we live in a world where price to earnings no longer matters. What matters is the word of Jerome Powell. And he knows that. So when he's pressed by a senator, on the floor of the Senate, and he's testifying, and they say, hey, this transitory stuff, he just says to us as a normal person, hey, that's ridiculous. How is inflation transitory? At what point is it not transitory? Speak to me like, a normal human being. Don't spout this Fed speak at me. And at that point, when Powell's put under pressure, he says, you know what, yeah, I got to admit, this transitory stuff, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But he's not going to maintain that. He's not going to remain under that kind of pressure. And again, it was very little pressure. I mean, it's, a piddly, Republican senator from Pennsylvania who's retiring. It's not like Pat Toomey is some big Fed hawk. It's not like, Powell had to deal with getting grilled by Ron Paul like Ben Bernanke used to have to deal with. Ben Bernanke had to have some fortitude and he had to have a lot of confidence in order to, lie on camera, when Ron Paul asked him fairly simple questions. But, somebody like Pat Toomey is not nearly, I don't think, as of a challenge. It's just that Powell is a uniquely weak man. And so he buckled under the very, what little pressure Toomey was able to muster. And so he came out and he said, yeah, transitory is dead. But he's not going to back that up. He's not a consistent guy. As soon as there's a little bit of pain, it used to be, hey, what's Powell's line? Is it a 20% decline in the stock market? Is it a 10% decline? Is it a 5% decline? No. Now it's one day where we drop 1%, like we did today, or, it's just a bad day in general, like yesterday. And Powell's, he has a tendency to snap back and to say, no, I will not allow this. Now, I don't really have a great segue, but I can't get through today without mentioning the man who, in my opinion, is the perfect avatar of the insanity of of the stock market, in modern America, and that is, of course, Jim Cramer, I guess you'd say the most popular host on CNBC, the guy who likes to roll his sleeves up and shout at the TV, and he paces around his studio while he's talking on the phone, kind of like I do when I record, these little rants of mine. I'm always pacing back and forth. You might be able to hear wood creaking under my shoes. But unlike Jim Cramer, I'm not a highly paid ex-fund manager who shouts at the TV or shouts through the TV. I'm not given carte blanche by a major media network to demand that the U.S. military strap people to chairs and have needles shoved in their arms. But, we can't all be Jim Cramer now, can we? In case you haven't heard, last night on his show, Mad Money, Jim Cramer, who, normally spends his show giving terrible stock tips and shouting, buy, 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 or sell, sell, sell. Well, he rarely shouts sell. He almost never tells anybody to sell anything. Jim Cramer is one of these guys who likes to pump up the moron longs. Well, last night he went on an unhinged rant, demanding that we have vaccine mandates, not just for working in this country, not just for working at major corporations, not just for working at the government, not just for being a member of the military, but just for being an American existing at all. He compared this to a war. He said during the war, we have a draft, and you have to go fight unless you're a conscientious objector. And so he's saying anyone who doesn't want to take the vaccine in this war on the Wu flu must be ready to prove their claim of their conscientious objector status in court. And he says Biden should call out the military and have them do it. They know how to do it right. And we basically need troops going door to door searching for the unjabbed so they can grab them and shove needles in their arms by force. I wouldn't have guessed that Jim Cramer would have been the first to finally get to this point, but we have members now of the mainstream media, or I shouldn't say that, of the corporate media, calling for the military to go out and forcibly vaccinate people. It's a scary time to be alive. But then again, Jim Cramer is known for his unhinged rants. It is his trademark. Like him or hate him, I tend to be more on the negative end of that spectrum. But he had a similar unhinged rant back during the 2008 crash, where he whined and cried about how stock prices were going down, and nobody understands how difficult it is to have your stocks go down. And he was almost crying, it seemed to me. Now, crying in a fit of hysteria or crying in a fit of immense sadness, I don't know. I'll let you be the judge. But let's just say that I think that Cramer's mental instability warranted him being pulled off of the air a long, long time ago. What's that been since the 2008 crash? 13 years? Gosh. Amazing to think that guy is still on TV. But think of the stuff he's saying. And you know what, to be honest, I think that a lot of his audience would probably not take too kindly to his plan of forced vaccinations. I wonder how if that might affect him at all in the ratings. Because, the people who tend to watch Jim Cramer, these are retail investors. These are guys who have a little bit of money that they want to put in. This is what you call dumb money. That's what Jim Cramer's audience is. It's dumb money central. Think of Dave Portnoy's fans, but Gen Xers and Boomers instead of, Gen Z and Millennials. So it'll be interesting now that Cramer has broken the ice on this topic. He's injected the idea. I wonder if anyone else in the corporate press will start to pick up on this. Frankly, I don't think that this was planned. I don't think this is something that's, being disseminated centrally if Cramer's the first one to talk about it. Cramer's not normally someone who is the starting point of new media narratives. That's just not the kind of personality he is. You would think it would start with, maybe a morning news show or something, or maybe some primetime anchor on MSNBC or CNN. CNBC is, they're somewhat removed from the typical corporate press ecosystem. There actually is a bit of diversity amongst their staff, politically speaking. It's not like CNN where everyone is a shit lib. You've got a mix of corporate Democrats and boomer cons over at CNBC, but not really. Not. I shouldn't say boomer con is perhaps too broad of a term. These aren't like Mike Lindell fans. They are country club Republicans, but ones who are much more passionate about, the myth of the Founding Fathers and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all that stuff, and rugged individualism. The founder of the Tea Party was Rick Santelli, who is still on CNBC. He was on CNBC back then, at the start of the Tea Party movement. And he is still there today. He's a pretty prominent guy. He's not, he's not an anchor or a host, but I mean, he's on all day, all the time, and he's always given space to do his Rick Santelli rants. He's not the only one. But my point is, CNBC, it's not going to be the place. If you wanted to inject this narrative into the zeitgeist, I would not hand a sheet of paper to Jim Cramer and say, hey, let's go out and advocate for forced vaccinations using the military. I think that this is probably just Jim Cramer going off a cliff, as he is wont to do, because he's a crazy person. So hopefully this will not gain traction. I don't expect the rest of the media to follow Jim Cramer's lead, but there's a chance of it now that he has broken the ice. So back to Powell and the transitory inflation and the turmoil in the stock market. I mean, it's hard for me to say, because I mean, it's a blip. If you look at how much stocks go up, the amount that they've gone down as a result of this confusion over Powell's stance regarding inflation. But I've said for a long time, the market is not going to finally crash because Powell has decided to deflate the bubble. He had that opportunity. He chose not to. He said, no, that's not what I want to do. The bubble is going to deflate once Powell's word has lost its potency. Because Powell's real power is expectations management. It's his influence. And when he loses that power, when all of a sudden Powell can't say something to boost the market spirits and see an immediate rise in stock prices, within seconds or minutes, that's when the potential for, the real crash will begin to manifest. So, with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.